All right, hey everybody, welcome back to another video. Derek James here, and in today's video, we're gonna do a bit of story time, and I'm going to share about my second contract win. Many of you have kind of famously heard about my government contract, road salt contract from back in the day. But the truth is, there's been many other contracts that I've won throughout my career, and specifically at that point in time in my career. So today I wanted to share a second contract, and the point of this is really to motivate and inspire those of you who are new and you haven't won any contracts, or those of you who are going after really teeny tiny, very small contracts, being the second contract that I had won for the small business government contractor that I worked for. It was a great experience, and this contract, it wasn't for years and years and years. It only took a couple months to perform the service that we needed to perform. And we were able to profit over $50,000 on the contract, with the contract being over $260,000 in total awarded obligation value from the agency. This actually was with the VA, the Department of Veteran Affairs. And this contract was to perform lead paint assessment. So back in the day, especially at this period of my life, there was no SAM.gov, at least not for contract opportunities kind of being listed that you would respond to like you would do nowadays on SAM.gov. During that time, we had what was called FBO, Fed Biz Ops. And if you go back to the very beginning of my YouTube channel, they're really cool. Like, they haven't gotten any views, these videos, because they're so old, but they're like relics because they're like my SamBiz live episodes, but they're FBO. So I literally have videos of FBO if you go all the way back to my first videos, so you can see how different, kind of things looked. It was still the same outcome in terms of opportunities being posted. But this particular contract, in the road salt story, this was well before even starting this channel in GovKid method, right? I created these channels to showcase my experience to help others that are new in the space as well. So I used to scroll a lot. When I first started working at that job, it was pretty much, here's a laptop, here's a desk, here's FBO, like, knock yourself out. I didn't really have too much formal training. And after I had won the road salt contract, because I was really wanting to leave at that time, for those of you who know that story and that point of time in my life, once I had won the road salt contract, I kind of got a new burst of energy, and I was revived, and I had hope, and that was what kept me going, kept me busy, scrolling through opportunities essentially throughout the winter into the spring, when I found the lead paint assessment opportunity posted on FedBiz Ops. And so this was, of course, an opportunity that we responded to, and we had won. And so, being in true spirit and true form of me being so new, especially at that time, I was going after anything and everything, and I was responding to so many source of sought notices, and I was responding to so many solicitations, and working with other people in the company who would help me price. But then I was the guy who was just like living on the phone, right? So I had found a number of, I don't remember the exact number, and this is so long ago at this point. I'm trying to retell these stories now so that they can live on to motivate, inspire you, and let you know kind of what's possible. And there's still opportunities like this out there today, just like there's road salt opportunities. There's also lead paint assessment opportunities. And I'll back into too, like, why this opportunity needed to exist and why it's going to continue to exist for the future, because it was a great contract. I had already alluded to that it only took a couple months to perform on this. So we had responded, we won, and I was the guy living on the phone, right? And so I had found a number of different local contractors who were environmental companies. Because if you don't know, lead paint assessment is when you go in to inspect and mark or target or qualify areas that test positive for lead paint. So naturally, it would be an environmental company of sorts whom would provide a person or a team rather, along with the equipment like the guns, the radio frequency guns, to perform this service. So we were able to make this contract work, for example, in terms of limitations on subcontracting, as well as just from a profitability standpoint, like I said, making probably well over 50,000, right? Because I wasn't the accountant, I was the business development person. So I got to see some stuff, but I didn't get to see everything necessarily when it was said and done. So I know at least, okay, over 260K contract, over 50K in profit. We were able to increase our profitability though, because we were also able to provide our own people. And this is a theme that I think I'm going to continue to share in future videos, because for those of you who are teaming, you're legal middlemaning, whatever, it's okay, and it's more than okay. It's encouraged if and when you can use your own people, your own team in conjunction with the teaming partners. That's going to get you to, whether you're having to meet your 50%, but it's also going to make you more profitable, which is going to lower your the contract dollar value that you respond to, okay, because there's less of a markup because it's not all from a teaming partner, right? And then, like I said, you're going to be more profitable on the contract. So, for example, on this contract, having a point person, having a lead, having somebody who has the necessary licenses, right? Because you need all that. Not anybody can just come in and do this. So you're just like in any other contract, you're teaming with companies that are qualified to provide this. They have the licenses, they have the credentials, and if they have to pass tests, all these sorts of things. It depends on the industry, right? And so we're talking about environmental licenses. And yeah, you better believe that you have to be qualified to provide lead paint assessment, right? So if we can find a company, this is what they do, right? But we can also hire people who have the necessary credentials, right? But maybe they're not working for a company, so we can hire them as part of our company. You know what I'm saying? Now there's not an additional middleman link in the chain because we're paying them direct, right? And that's what small business government contracting is all about, okay? That's why teaming is allowed. It's why you can work with subcontractors. They want you getting your hands dirty. They want you getting in there. They want you learning this stuff and doing this stuff. So, but it's also a way to increase your profitability, which is why we were able to profit what we were able to profit. So when it comes down to actually performing this service, we have our own PM, somebody who's on the site, making sure things are safe. We didn't need a designated site safety person. It wasn't that serious. It wasn't that big of a contract. And it wasn't that nature of a contract, okay? As well as, again, the team that's going in. So they have these guns. If you don't know, it's pretty interesting because I didn't know anything about it before we did the contract. But they have the guns, and they can go in, they can test different areas. And there's a system, there's a protocol to how they go about doing this. So they can mark all these areas that are testing positive for having lead in them, right? Because remember back in the day, there was a point, I think it was around the 70s, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, believe it was in the early 70s, mid 70s, where they switched over from using lead paint to using non-lead paint because they found out the paint chips and the paint dust was hazardous to homes and to children and to anybody in the house. So they made that switch over. But if you think about these government agencies with these old buildings, they have so much lead paint. And typically the protocol is to paint over it. You just paint over it, paint over it, paint over it. And that kind of seals it in, right? But guess what? And this is what I was alluding to like 5 minutes ago. Why is lead paint assessment? Why are lead paint assessments important? And why are they going to continue to be contracts that are procured? Why are they needed? That's because of construction. Because this is for the VA, right? So imagine there's a hospital or you name it, right? Typical VA, you're thinking medical in nature primarily, right? But there's also VA offices too. Imagine them having to do renovations because the buildings are so old. Well, if you're going to come in and start tearing down walls, you're going to start taking down drywall, you're going to start cutting things, whatever sort of demolition, renovation is required for the update. All that dust now is going to get in the air. And if this thing was built in the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, odds are there's a strong likelihood that it's going to be painted with lead paint. So then you come in, you do this, then you stir up all this lead paint up into the air. That's going to make people very sick, especially if you're dealing with buildings that are medical and health related in nature. Maybe people that already have susceptible immune systems and other ailments. Not a good idea. And it doesn't mean that they can't do the work, but it does mean that they're going to have to be doing air monitoring. They're going to have to be using certain types of environmentally controlled construction practices, like sealing areas off, making sure areas are totally taken back down to zero. I'm not an environmental specialist myself, but I do know when you're dealing with an environmental project, these are the sort of policies and practices you do have to put into place. And the way that you handle that contract is not only going to be more involved, but it's going to be more expensive. It's going to probably take longer because of this very important need, right? So as long as there's construction needed on old buildings, lead paint assessments are going to be needed as well. So until all the old buildings get updated and all the lead paint is gone, then they're probably not going to need to provide this. But until then, there's going to be opportunities for lead paint assessments, not just at the VA, but lots of other DoD. You look at Army, you look at Air Force, especially Army though, have lots of old buildings, lots of bases. Just think about it. Think about all that lead paint that's sitting there. So if you can be a company who is part of your offer, your service offering, if you can have some sort of environmental branch or leg, right, or spoke in your umbrella, as I like to talk about, this can be a type of contract, and they can be much bigger, than $260,000. But if you think about the nature and the scope of the contract, as I've explained it in this video, can you do that? Can you find qualified teams? Can you hire employees, put it together, and go after it and perform it? This was, I don't remember the exact number, but it was 5, 6, maybe 7 buildings, something like that. So they would go in, do one building, then the next, and the next. We had to coordinate with our core, with the folks that are actually in the building, okay? Because if it was an area we needed to get in, right, and do this for like a day or a couple days before it was finished, they would have to kind of reroute to another room in the building, for example, so that we could get in and do our job. So that type of coordination was also really important, something that our PM/scheduler was able to coordinate too. And that coordination with the government is just necessary and required to not only fulfill the contract, but do a good job on the contract. We got excellent CPARS ratings. Upon the completion of that, we performed, I don't remember the exact POP. I think we had something like between 6 and 12 months to finish it. And it took a couple of months, right? And it was consecutive. There wasn't huge breaks in between. You don't want to do that. You want to get in, do your job, get out, and get paid, okay? So making over $50,000 profit on a contract like this, I mean, as the person who's putting the team together, You don't have to have direct lead paint assessment experience to be able to perform this job for a federal agency. You don't need that, okay? What you need to be able to do, though, is everything that I've explained in this video. You need to put it together. And I'm a big proponent on teams, working with subcontractors, but I'm equally a proponent on all the ways that you can bring in your own people, because it's your own profitability. And for those of you who are struggling to win contracts, and I talk about this in other videos, you're not negotiating your teaming partners down enough. But another thing to think about is you're possibly missing opportunities where, you could hire a qualified person on Indeed and pay them directly instead of essentially paying employees through another third party where someone else is going to put their 20% on it. You know what I mean? So that goes to you. That goes to your pocket. And you make more profit, you make more money at the end of the day, and you have more control over the project. And if you do have contracts that are ongoing and they're not project-based, you can increasingly do that and increasingly build your team where you're paying people directly. The whole thing with teaming and legal middlemaning is you have to start somewhere. So it's an opportunity. It gets your foot in the door, but you don't have to stay there forever. After all, this is all about making as much money as you can while continuing to provide a good service to your customer, who just happens to be the US federal government. So this was my second contract. After winning this contract, seeing the profit, seeing how we managed it, and we put together the team, it was incredible. And after winning the second, I started to really have belief that, okay, this is something that's beyond a fluke. It's beyond luck, because when I won the first, the road salt contract, anybody could get lucky, right? Even a blind squirrel could find a nut. But after the second one, it's pretty much kind of letting me off my leash. Also because it was so environmental, it's certainly different than road salt. So what was possible just totally blew up my mind. I just started thinking about all of the possibilities. Honestly, it was too many possibilities. And, now that I'm far, removed and in a different position than I am today, and have had the privilege to help so many of you who are new into the space to do federal contracting properly and to win real contracts for your business. But, I'm sharing from where I was at that point in time, which was contract number 2. And I was still a kid, and it was just crazy. It was crazy what was possible. And maybe I'll do another video on it, but the skill set that was required, resourcefulness, the ability to, and furthermore, the ability to figure things out, the ability to get on the phone. I had 5 years of sales experience before even doing that. So I had a number of skill sets that I did bring. I used to live on the phone doing financial plans, retirement plans. So I was no stranger to talking to financial advisors and other things. I have an MBA in international business, a bachelor's degree in finance. I came from formal training, but then, I reached that point in my life where things kind of fell apart and nothing was working out, and I stumbled my way into government contracting, and things swooped up drastically for me. But it was only true because I busted my butt. And if I didn't even make it to the road salt contract, where I had the napkin in my pocket and I had a tally for every day till the end of the year, because at the end of the year I was going to quit, my story. And then when my boss, she got that phone call from the contracting officer, hey, can you provide road salt? I know that you're an IT company, but we're desperate. We're calling every contractor in the area. The barges are frozen. We can't get the road salt in to the Air National Guard. So we can't land the planes. It's a hazard. It's dangerous. Can you get road salt? And she laughs and hangs up the phone. And I come in and say, hey, this is my opportunity to prove myself. Boss, if I can find the road salt, will you call them back and take the contract? And then it was like a half-hearted, begrudgingly, yeah, sure, go for it. It was only making to that point that allowed me to get to something like this, a second contract, but then a third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, and I won 32 contracts worth over $15 million. And yes, by contract 32, the way that I thought and approached federal contracting was very different than contract number 2. But you have to start somewhere. And it worked for me, and I didn't have any knowledge of government contracting. It wasn't on the YouTube. It wasn't on YouTube University. There was nothing at that time. And for me, it was a laptop, it was FBO, it was a phone, and it was a chip on my shoulder. It was, I need to make something work. It was a rock or a hard place. Take your pick, Derek. You know what I mean? And it was the hardest point of my life, but from the hardest point of my life, I built one of the peaks in my life that I'm the most proud of because of what I came out of. And I'm sharing today's story for those of you who are maybe you're at a low point, or maybe you've been bidding and not winning, or maybe you've been winning but you haven't been winning enough or large enough contracts. I'm sharing this to re-inspire you like I got re-inspired, to re-energize you like this second contract and the first contract did for me, so that I didn't quit, so that I didn't give up, so that I remembered why I was doing all this in the first place. Yes, it was to make money, but what was the money for? For me, I always wanted financial independence. I wanted financial freedom. I saw my dad work 7 days a week my entire life. And so all my best memories are with him sitting in a chair watching movies because he was too tired to do anything else, because he got hooked on that overtime working for the big 3, like so many did in that generation. I never wanted that. That's why I put so much into formal education. And then that was a freaking sham, you know, getting $60,000 in debt, you know. But I read The Rich Dad Poor Dad. I did the Tony Robbins books. I did all that as a teenager growing up, wanting to change my life. But then when I find myself mid-20s and I'm like minus $60K in debt, living at home with my parents, you know, come off a number of failed job opportunities, sunk the rest of my money into a pizza restaurant that failed after a year. And now I'm like at this government contractor place, which is super confusing, super overwhelming. And all my colleagues are super left-brained, like engineers, PMs. Many of them used to work for the government and they came over for us. And then here's Derek, this right-brained, kind of creative, but all over the place, has no experience in government contracting type person. And they're all like, why did you hire this guy? Oh, we hired him to do BD. You know what I mean? And the first week, my boss tried to fire me. Like, you know, Roy was the one who saved me. Or in other videos, I've called him Frank. But, you know, the recruiter, the guy, he's not here anymore, but he's the whole reason GovCon method exists. He's the whole reason why I even made it after week 1 working for that. So he was a guardian angel in my life. And he gets all of the credit. And he's not here anymore, you know? And my last year working for a government contractor, things started to fall apart massively. The things that kept me there. And one of the big ones was, you know, I had to attend his funeral, unfortunately. And that really, really sucked. So got to experience a lot of life throughout this period of time. So if any of this speaks to you, know that it's possible. You know, I receive emails every month, sometimes every week, sometimes every day, from people winning their first contracts, you know, or comments on my videos. You're not any worse than anybody else. Truly, the person who was standing in my own way was me. And I think for a lot of you, the person who's standing in your own way is yourself. So really connecting to, yes, it's about the money, but what does the money mean to you? It's that meaning that will drive you. After the no, after the no, after the no. Oh, they're not giving me feedback. Contracting's not giving me feedback. I'm bidding too high, I'm bidding too high, I'm bidding too low. They didn't like my proposal. I can't talk to the teaming partners. They're not calling me back. They ghosted me on the site visit. This is all the nature of the beast. It's the nature of any industry. Pick an industry where there aren't these problems. So none of these are the problem. The problem is that you're not connecting to something that's strong enough, that's bigger than all of those. Because once you connect to something that's bigger than all of those, New levels, new devils. They're not problems anymore. Now your problems become, I'm winning all these contracts. I need to learn how to assemble a team. I need to learn how to do compliance accounting because now I have all these new requirements because I'm winning all these contracts. But those are good problems to have. And I hope that you have them if this is something that you want for your life. And if you want to use government contracting, as I say, as a vehicle to change your life. It changed mine, and it can absolutely change yours if you will allow it to. So let me know what you thought of this video. It's the second video. I've done a video in the past on $1 million contract that I've won, heavy equipment contract. But for whatever reason, this video just feels like going back and sharing story time and more reminiscent to the road salt story video. Make over $50,000 in a couple months on a contract over $260K, providing lead paint assessment services for the VA.